Yep. Hello everyone, welcome to DUIResults.com. This is Robert Schefter. Very pleased to have a special guest today, a representative from Smart Start Ignition Interlock Company. I have with us Kathleen Riley. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you.
And if you
It's
could
good to be here.
give us a quick introduction, tell us who you are and what you do at Smart Start.
Well, my name is Kathleen Riley, or Kathy to my friends. I am a judicial services liaison, and I oversee some other reps in other states as well. But I cover Pennsylvania and West Virginia. Have a background in Ignition Interlock with the state of West Virginia, where I worked for 2 years. And what we do at Smart Start, or what I do, is I'm a liaison between the company and attorneys, judges, probation officers, just educating them not only on the interlock, but we also have portable alcohol monitoring devices that can be used with probation, family courts, things like that.
How long have you been with Smart Start?
Since 2012.
Awesome. And I can tell everyone out there, I've seen Kathleen speak. She makes presentations at conferences for attorneys for the Criminal Defense Association here in Pennsylvania. That's why I asked her to be on the show, because she is the foremost authority, in my opinion, on Ignition Interlock. And I know all of myself and all of my colleagues call or email her when we have a question. So I'm very pleased to have her here today. And as you know, if you've been watching the shows, or if you pay attention to DUI law at all in Pennsylvania, or watch the news, in the last year or two, the Ignition Interlock has really become a big deal. And that's because not only did it replace for DUIs the occupational limited license, but now it's in effect for ARD as well. So I wanted to touch base on that quickly. We've covered that in prior shows, but the reason that Ignition Interlock is such a big topic now is, number one, a couple years ago, for years and years, if you got a DUI, whether it was ARD or a conviction, you were eligible for what's called the occupational limited license. And that's what everybody knew for years. And then there may have been a requirement for Ignition Interlock in some cases afterward.
Afterwards, under Act, what was it, 64 and 23 or 33,
Right.
there was still a requirement.
There was still, so Ignition Interlock was there, but it wasn't as prevalent. And then the legislature changed the law, did away with the work restricted license, and replaced it with Ignition Interlock. And I think that was a great thing, number one, because for the occupational limited license, if you had a conviction, you still had to serve, likely for a first offense, 60 days with no driving at all, and then you could get the work restricted license. An ARD, if I remember correctly, you couldn't get it. It was a straight no driving, and that was not good at all. So then they changed it so you could get the Ignition Interlock. And the best thing about that law when they changed it was, if you, and we'll get into the specifics, but basically you were eligible for the Ignition Interlock upon conviction almost immediately, and we'll talk about the timeline. So people could still drive even though they were technically suspended. But the legislature, as you will recall, Kathleen, they messed up the first go-round because they did not include ARD.
Correct. That was one of the technical updates that, before even the new law went into effect, they had the technical updates, which was Act 30. And they went into play October 20th. So,
2018.
Of 2018.
Yeah, so we had a time period there where if you were convicted of a first offense DUI, you were eligible to get the Ignition Interlock in your vehicle immediately. So for the entire year you were suspended, you could drive with the Ignition Interlock. However, if you were a first offender and you were eligible for ARD, meaning you were on the lower end of severity of DUIs and it was a first offense, pretty clean record, you had a likely 30 or 60 day license suspension, and you were not eligible for the Ignition Interlock, meaning you couldn't drive for 30 or 60 days, yet someone who was convicted could.
Exactly.
So that was a real issue for a time period, but give the legislature credit, they did correct it, and as of October of last year,
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes.
You can get the Ignition Interlock with ARD. So that's just kind of the general background. So basically now, anybody in Pennsylvania who is charged with a DUI, whether you are eligible for ARD or whether you're convicted, Ignition Interlock is going to be in your life, right?
Yeah, or it could be. With ARD, it's still optional. It's not mandatory for the 30, 60, or 90-day ARD cases. 30 days, we'll talk about that. With everything you have to do, it's really not worth the time and effort. I'd pay a friend, Uber, whatever the case may be, but there are those cases where the person has to have their license. we can get them through that process.
Right, and
Yeah.
we're also going to talk about the timing as
Yes.
well, because with a 30-day suspension, it doesn't mean on day one you have your ignition interlock.
No.
That's probably one of the biggest issues right now is the timing of
Correct.
everything. And we're gonna, and that's another reason why I'm very happy that Kathleen is here to go over that with us. But yes, she makes a great point with ARD, and I counsel clients every day on this. With ARD, the ignition interlock is optional. So whether you have a 30, 60, or 90-day suspension, just real quickly, if you're in that lowest tier, very few people, you're not going to have a license suspension. If you're in the middle tier, meaning from a 0.10 up to less than 0.16, you're going to have a 30-day license suspension. And then tier 3, 0.16 or higher, or any controlled substances, you're going to have a 60-day license suspension. And refusals are in there too.
But refusals, even if it's an ARD case or a first offense or a second and subsequent, refusal suspension comes first, and you must serve a 6-month hard suspension on those before you would be eligible, even in a first offense or an ARD case.
Right, so refusals are a little separate animal
Yes.
there. And so if you're eligible for ARD, the ignition interlock is optional, meaning you have the choice of not driving. You can say, whether it's 30, 60, 90 days, I'm just going to endure the suspension, I'm not going to drive, I'm going to get a ride or Uber, as Kathleen said, or you can opt to get the ignition interlock. And again, hopefully we'll have some time to talk about, as she said, 30-day, maybe not. 60-day, most people are going to, if they have to drive to work, for example, they're going to opt in on that. But it is optional for ARD. So when you look at expenses and timing, you can decide. So with that, I guess, general background on the law, one more thing, I guess, with the convictions. So we covered kind of ARD, what the suspensions are going to be. What are the 90-day suspensions under ARD? Is that for minors?
Minors, yes.
Okay, so
and I think, and this is where, as a vendor, that's your expertise and not mine, but I did give you the DUI sentencing guideline chart, and it's usually 90 days underage, or if there's other, I guess, circumstances. You would know.
Yeah. So I'm aware of the minor. I'm not aware of anything else. But definitely for a minor, if you're underage, you're looking at a 90-day suspension. You can still optional get the ignition interlock for 90 days. When we talk about convictions, again, there's a chart that PennDOT has available online, or certainly Smart Start or myself can provide for you. But just generally, for a first offense DUI, if you're convicted, if you're not eligible for ARD, upon conviction, again, that lowest tier, you're not going to get a suspension, so no worries about a license suspension or ignition interlock. But if you're in that middle tier or the highest tier for a first offense, it's a 1-year license suspension, and you're eligible to get the ignition interlock immediately, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So again, as we were talking earlier, you get that right away. Again, barring some timing issues, you may not be able to drive. You won't be able to drive on day one, as the law currently stands with PennDOT. Not the law, but really their processing of things.
Process.
But you're eligible right away, so for that whole year you can drive with the ignition interlock. Now when we get into second offenses, it gets a little more complicated, because for a second offense middle tier, you're looking at a 1-year license suspension, but you're not eligible immediately. You have to serve a hard 6 months, no driving,
Correct.
and then at 6 months, then you're eligible for the ignition interlock. Is that right?
Correct. And really, and with a refusal, it's 6-month hard suspension for the DUI and 6 months hard suspension for the refusal. So for a year, they would not be able to drive on a second or subsequent. But again, that's why I give you the charts, and they have the eligibility charts on PennDOT website that the clients could go and look at those as well.
Yeah, and when you get into, so refusal, again, it's kind of a different animal, but when you have consecutive suspensions, like for the refusal and for the DUI conviction for a refusal, the way PennDOT's going to handle those is a little different. And I don't want to get into this first show, we don't need to get into all that detail, but just know that refusals are different. When we get into second offense, highest tier, or third or subsequent offenses, when you're looking at your license suspension, there is going to be 18 months. And barring additional suspensions for revocation or habitual offenders, it's going to be an 18-month suspension thereafter.
Eligible 9 months.
Right, and that's the next point. So again, you're going to serve a hard 9 months, no driving at all, before you're eligible for the Ignition Interlock, but then after 9 months, you're eligible. And I guess one thing I want to point out before we go further is you need to contact an attorney when you're dealing with these issues, because I've had a lot of clients who are battling with PennDOT, and PennDOT's telling them, no, you're not eligible. And it's a straight 18-month suspension, second offense, no other contributing factors. And so I've had to battle with PennDOT, some of their representatives, and nothing against PennDOT, this is a lot to handle, or their representatives, but I've had instances where clients are frustrated because they call up there and they get someone who, in my mind, in my opinion and expertise, if my client is telling me really what they said, that it's just incorrect. They're telling them they're not eligible when they should be. Right. So you really need to seek out, you can contact your representative if you're already on the Ignition Interlock, you can contact Kathleen or someone from her company, or your attorney, contact me, and we can help you sort through those. Because even us who do this every day, there are still questions and gray areas that are difficult to answer.
It is, and one thing I will say is vendors, and there are 9 certified vendors in the state of Pennsylvania, and the PA DUI Association, we cannot see what's on PennDOT's website or what's on their system. So if there's other suspensions due to other issues, we can't see that. What we go by is the notification of suspension letter, or we'll get a copy that you've been sent of the restoration requirements letter, or ask to pull that so that we can see what's on there. That's one of the things I do for my attorneys and for their clients is I'll ask permission, take a look at it, and see if I can get an idea of what's going on. It's
Right.
not always clear, so if it's not clear to me, then I go back and say, your attorney may have to handle that. So
Right.
when in doubt, reach out.
Right, exactly. Reach out to your attorney, and it's so important, and we'll touch on this more. It's so important to have a vendor that is reliable and that you can trust. And based on my experience, I recommend Smart Start to my clients because I know Kathleen, again, is an expert on it, and whether it's her or someone else from her company, and I've heard some pretty bad horror stories about other vendors. So I'm not going to be specific with other vendors, but I can tell you that in my experience, Smart Start is the expert, is trustworthy, especially in our area, because I do know that clients have called me and who have used other vendors, and they are not talking to anyone in Pennsylvania. People are not familiar with Pennsylvania law at all, so that is important. Just like having a local attorney is very important. If you're in York, Adams County area, you want to have an attorney who is local and experienced in that area, because every county has their different requirements, just like every state has different requirements for the Ignition Interlock. Okay, so now I'd like to just move forward, Kathleen, and have you discuss a little bit about, we talked about the timing here. Oh, the first thing, one more point on the law. When they changed the law also, it used to be you had to turn in your license in court. When you were convicted, when you were sentenced, you handed in your license in court. And it was that way for years and years. You may still see things on the internet that say that. That's not true. Now, the law has changed. And was that October last year?
October 20th, same time with the ARD.
Right. So you no longer hand in your license in court or at your ARD hearing. What happens is you will sign a notification, an acknowledgement, where you acknowledge your license will be suspended. That suspension will take effect within 60 days is what the notice says. And then PennDOT will mail you a letter that gives you further instruction on that. In my experience, that letter is not always crystal clear on when you're eligible for the Ignition Interlock, but regardless, your suspension is not going to take effect until 60 days after you are sentenced, if it's a conviction, or after your ARD hearing. And I think the purpose of that was to give people time to set up the Ignition Interlock. And my thought process was, at the time when it was new, is that, oh, that's great. You can submit things early, get everything hooked up so that on day one, when your suspension starts, you can drive. That, to me, that was the purpose, but that's not really how it has panned out.
No, as a matter of fact, legislation allows PennDOT 20 days to process or respond to a petition, but that 20 days starts on the date the suspension hits.
Right.
So, not taking the license in that notification suspension letter does allow them to prepare, but also just to prepare rides, because there will be a time period that you can't drive. And we can talk more about that when we get into the timeline. But
Okay.
does that answer your question there?
Yeah. So And as far as the timeline, do we want to talk about that now? You want to get?
Yes, because yesterday, one of the counties actually had their DUI court. Two of the clients called me and said, I want to get set up, I want to get Ignition Interlock right away. And I said, slow down, take a deep breath, you've got plenty of time. Some companies actually, they'll send flyers out that says, I could get Ignition Interlock. Well, just know that when you come out of court, PennDOT doesn't even know either they've entered ARD or they've been convicted. PennDOT has to be notified, and the first thing you're going to get upon either conviction or entering into ARD is a notification of suspension letter. This letter will say that you are going to be suspended on a date. They've gotten better. They're getting a date now. Right. Says this is the date your license will go suspended. Here's how you surrender your license, although we have a shortcut on that. Or a better process of doing that, I should say. But, so they've got time. So from court, about 15 days to get that notification of suspension letter. So say they were yesterday, August 20th. October 20th, roughly, is when they would go suspended. So you've got plenty of time. So once they get that letter, then they can call one of the interlock companies and set up an appointment. Now, in the meantime, a lot of people want to get busy, what can I do, what can I do? Well, you can actually get what they call the DL 9108, which is the Ignition Interlock Limited License Petition from your attorney, and or it's on the PennDOT website. You can start working through the petition. A company cannot make an appointment until you have that notification of suspension letter.
Wait till you get that letter.
Wait until you get the letter, because just know if you get installed right away, you're not going to get any credit for any time that you're installed prior to your eligibility date. So you can start working on that. You make the appointment. What I do is tell the clients, or suggest to the clients, 7 to 10 days before they go suspended, that they could make their appointment ahead of time for 7 to 10 days beforehand.
And that's what I advise my clients, because I saw Kathleen speak and make that recommendation, and then she'll explain why, but that's important, that 7 to 10 day window. You don't want to get it installed right away, and you don't want to wait till the last day.
Exactly, because a lot of companies are, there's 9 different vendors, but slots are filling up. So make that appointment. With a company like SmartStart, we don't take credit cards right at the beginning, so if you change your mind on your date, no harm, no foul, you can switch that. Every company will do that for you, but make that appointment so you have your slot. You can start working on the paperwork. Now, as I said before, there's 9 certified vendors in the state, and I think you had mentioned something about a letter coming from PennDOT. What?
Yeah, so I've had a couple of clients call me. This is, in my mind, this is bad advertising, or false advertising in my mind. I've had clients call me and say, hey, I got an official notice from PennDOT that says I have to have the Ignition Interlock, I have to have it installed, I need to get it installed right away, call this number. And it looks very official, but it's not. It's a letter from a vendor, not SmartStart. I'm not going to mention the name, but it looks like an official notice from PennDOT. You need to understand that you're going to get one letter from PennDOT that is going to notify you of your suspension. The effective date is going to be very specific and have all of your information. So you'll get that letter. But then after that, if you get another letter that says like Notice, Pennsylvania, it looks like it's from PennDOT, it's not. That's an advertisement. The bad part, number one, is it's misleading because it looks like it's from PennDOT. Number two is it's going to tell you to get hooked up immediately. And as Kathy said, you're going to get, if you get hooked up 2 months early, it serves you no good other than the fact that you have this device in your vehicle way too soon, you're not getting credit for it, and you're paying for it. And so that's poor. So the best way to choose a vendor is to go on the website, padui.org, and I believe that website is listed in the PennDOT letter?
It is listed in the PennDOT letter, absolutely.
And you're not going to get that type of misleading advertisement from SmartStart. You can choose whatever vendor you like, and I'm not saying there's not other good ones out there. Just like there's other good attorneys out there, but you need to be selective. You need to check out different vendors, okay? Again, I'm going to recommend, and will always recommend, SmartStart because I think they're trustworthy, they're reliable, and they're not going to send you that kind of false, misleading, just like attorneys send out a lot of false, misleading advertisements about you're going to go to jail if you don't hire me, that sort of thing. So yeah, again, kind of goes into the timeline. Don't feel like if you get this letter from this company, if you call and it's a company, it's a vendor, it's not PennDOT. Yeah, just hang up and seek out a proper one.
And why I bring this up, I mean, thank you for all your referrals. I really appreciate it because your clients become my clients and I'm all about the customer service. But clients need to be informed consumers. You know, interlocks, there's 9 different companies. They may look different. This is our interlock device. You know, all shapes, sizes, colors. They all work the same. You get in the car, you start the car, you blow into them, they work. What makes them different is, you know, pricing, blow pattern, but especially the pricing. And, you know, you need to be informed consumers because once you sign that contract, you know, if you're going to be with them for a year and you break that contract, 8 of the 9 companies will charge a fee to break that contract. We're the only company in the state. We're month to month. But so during that timeline that we're talking about, you get your notification of suspension letter 15 days after court. Say you have 6 weeks. You know, call around. Go to the PADUI.org website. Look at the different companies. They will have a whole list in your area. Call around and ask the questions. You know, be informed. Once you make a decision, then call them back and set an appointment. In the meantime, again, start working on the paperwork. 7 to 10 days before you're installed, or before your suspension, you get installed. Now, with a petition, a DL 9108, let me just briefly go through this. You have page 1 you will fill out. There are specific things to do on a checklist on page 2. The one item they talk about down here is a DL 9108 SC. If you are being installed with the Ignition Interlock, you must get that back from the vendor. So once you're installed, the vendor has a PennDOT approved person and they must get this completed form. It's page 4 of the petition, the DL 9108 SC. They have to fill out the section D and get it back to you. This form, plus page 1 and 2 and all the other fees and forms, must go in with the petition together. This is one of the biggest errors that I find with clients saying they've been, you know, denied. Why? Because the company they went with didn't get this form back to them to send in with the petition. And that's one thing I do for your clients is before they're allowed to send anything certified mail to PennDOT, I want them to give me a call to make sure they have every piece of paper they need, all the forms and the fees. And the other thing too I want to mention is I've given some of these forms out before and at conferences. Well, PennDOT, July 1st, I'm just going to use July 1st as a date, updated the forms required, not only the DL 9108, but the DL 80, the DL 143, and then at the end of DL 3731. They've not only updated the forms, but there's a slight fee increase. So you must use the forms that are dated 7/19 in parentheses,
Right.
because of the.
And there's a I know you're probably, you know, at home watching this and you're saying, oh my gosh, all those forms and numbers. That's why, and I have the forms now because Kathleen provided them because she knows the updates and I stay updated as well. So again, that just heightens the importance of hiring a good lawyer and a good Ignition Interlock company and vendor to help you through that. So with the, that's something I wasn't clear on. So the actual motorist, the defendant, submits the forms. I thought
Yes.
the vendor doesn't send
No,
them. Okay.
no.
They return it to you.
They
and
return it
have
to you. Now, unless a vendor does that, which I don't know of any vendors that actually submits them. Allegheny County, which does their own interlock, they actually help them prepare, but still they make the client send the form. The onus is on the client to send that paperwork in certified mail only. You cannot walk it in, you cannot courier it in, you can't even drone it in. You must send it certified mail.
And your recommendation is to either run it by you or
Yeah.
run it by your attorney before you
Correct.
send it in, so we make sure everything is correct, so there's no hiccups with PennDOT.
And missing a document, because if they miss a document, say they missed the DL 9108 SC. I had a case just the other day and it was, an attorney reached out to me and we finally uncovered what the issue was. The company never sent back that form to the client. Now, I'm not saying we're perfect.
Mhm.
You know, we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
So, you know, in this case, that's why the person was denied and they didn't even know that they needed to send that in. So,
Right.
you know, as I say, read this form. It prints off in 5 pages. Page 1 is information, page 2 is your checklist, where to send it. Page 3 is instructions for page 1 and 2. Page 4 is that DL9108SC that needs to be completed by the vendor. You'll fill out A and B, and the vendor fills out D, and then when you get it back, sign and date it, put it with the rest of your paperwork, and then instructions for page 4.
Yeah, that's important for me as well, because honestly, I have not sat down with a client and gone through. They've not asked me to do this, to review it before they send it back in. But I'm going to start advising that, because I think it's important. Because anytime you're dealing with PennDOT, you want to make sure that you have everything filled out accurately and completely with all the other.
Right, because if they deny it, it could be another 2 to 3 weeks till you get the mail and get it back into them, and especially for that 30-day suspension. You know, so, and the other thing too is back to, you know, so you're installed, you get this, we make sure everything's okay. I always recommend that they send it into PennDOT 5 to 7 days before their suspension starts. PennDOT will keep it for up to 30 days, but if somebody fills it out and sends it in 2 or 3 months before their suspension, PennDOT will deny it and send it back to them. So they will keep it for up to 30 days, but again, they have interlock installed already, they're paying for something they're not getting credit for.
And again, that's why the timing is crucial here. Right. You don't want to do it too early, you don't want to do it too late. Right. So that's why the 7 to 10 day window that we've come up with seems to be the best. So they fill this out, send it into PennDOT 5 days early. Even if PennDOT gets it a week early, they're going to hold on. They're not going to process it until your suspension starts. So again, that's a reason not to do it too early, because it's going to sit there. And if it's too early, they're going to deny it, which I didn't know. They're just going to reject it. So
they're going to reject it.
Do not do it. Do not do it too early. So in the normal process, you send the paperwork in. PennDOT processes it. Do you have a feel? I know they have up to 20 days. Right. And I know in the beginning it was taking a couple weeks.
Oh,
now that's been cut down in my experience.
7 to 10 days. Now I just had one yesterday contact me, says I just got it in 11 days, but that was from the day she mailed it in, which was just before her suspension started. So 7 to 10 days, they're getting better. But then again, Pennsylvania has a lot of DUIs in the state. Now the one thing I do want to point out, and with the update of the petition, their acknowledgement saying that you have surrendered your license. This, instead of sending a license in with the petition, and it says you can send it in. Well, you never know when they're going to flip the switch. It says, you know, on a certain date, but if PennDOT gets it early, they might, you know, surrender it a little bit early to get ready for the petition. I tell the clients, walk into your local driver's license center with your license, turn it in, get a receipt for it. That way they can drive up until the time or the day before their suspension starts.
Okay, so when should they, I'm confused on this. Okay. Now, when do they turn their license in? When they mail this in, or the day before their suspension?
Day before their suspension, because they're valid up until the...
Right, but you're mailing this in before that.
Exactly.
And that says you acknowledge you've turned your license in.
But you
really haven't.
Yes.
But by the time they process it, you have.
Exactly.
Okay, because that's what I've been telling people, again, based on what you've told me. Hold on to that license as long as you can. So, and the day before your suspension starts. And is it true you can go to any PennDOT licensing center?
Yes.
Because there's like a small one down in Stewartstown. I'm like, well, better call and make sure they do it. Because I know the big one on Queen Street here in New York, I know they do it.
Right.
But as long as it's an official PennDOT licensing center. Not just a notary, but an official PennDOT licensing center, turn it in and get a receipt. That's the most important thing.
So that you verify you turned it in, but at the beginning there was an issue because it had not gotten out to all the centers that they were allowed to do this, but the vendors on our monthly conference call have corrected that. So.
All right, well, that's an important point. I'm glad you brought that up. Yes. That's important.
So just one final thing I would like to share with your viewers is how an interlock works.
Absolutely. They've probably been waiting for that the whole show, so let's get into that a little bit.
Well, when you get in the car, and by the way, I've been doing this since 2013, so if I can do it, anybody can do it. But you get in the car and either you turn your key on or you press your start button on your vehicle. I have a remote start now, although during the interlock, if the interlock's installed, a remote start won't work. So push button is what I'm trying to say. So I get in, push my button. It will put power to the electronics on the dash, you know, your radio, your heat, and everything else. But it also puts power to the unit. As you can see, my unit is warming up. Now when it's ready, it'll say blow. And this will be a 5 to 6 second blow pattern. Like I said, the blow patterns are different depending on the company. Some are blow, inhale, blow. Some are blow, inhale. This is what we call straight hum, but I'm going to blow and hum.
So it like clicks when
it clicks when it's done, and it says pass. Now I can start my car.
Okay.
Now we'll get into violations, I think, in the next series. Now for those, and I do want to bring this up, for those that have asthma, you know, a breathing issue that couldn't do the full blow, asthma, COPD, you know, just breathing issues. In Pennsylvania, they do allow a reduced air volume.
Okay.
Clients need to get documentation on from their physician on the physician letterhead saying they need reduced air volume and the reason for it. They would give it to their vendor, in this case Smart Start. We would submit it and get approval for reduced air, and it's about half this. It's 3 seconds. This is full air in my car, and yes, I run Interlock Live. In the car is reduced air,
Okay.
and I've had severe asthmatics and people with COPD in some of my counties where the PO's like, I don't think they're going to be able to do this. I'm like, come on out to my car, and they've been able to start my car. So reduced air volume does make a difference, and that is something you can do from, if you know they're going to need to get an interlock or they're going to opt for it. That's something they should do ahead of time, so that when the day of installation occurs, we can have the reduced air volume already put on.
Great.
Okay?
Wonderful. All right, so that's a quick demonstration. We're probably...
oh, and
you have
cameras.
anything?
Yes, cameras.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, that's one other update.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, as of last year, September, October, I forget, I think it was September 1 about last year, all interlock installs must have a camera. This is a good thing, but it also holds you accountable and identify who's giving the test. And we can talk about that in the next series of why it actually really benefits the clients.
Right. It can benefit you if there's an issue. You can say, look, it's me blowing there. And
Right.
Right.
But when it comes to compliance and removal, it can benefit the client too.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Well, again, Kathleen, thank you so much for being here. I think it was a great show.
Yeah.
Look forward to doing more. Again, it's Smart Start. You want to give a number quick?
Yes, right here it is. You can call the 800 number, 1-800-880-3394, and talk to our customer service center. If you have any questions, just so you can either talk to your attorney,
Yeah.
and he has my phone number, or he'll let me know that I need to call you, or just tell SmartStart, the customer's call center, say, I'd like to talk to the rep in PA, and they will actually put a voicemail through to me.
Wonderful. So again, Ignition Interlock, huge in Pennsylvania. If you or anyone you know is involved with a DUI, they're going to have to deal with it. So have them get a hold of me. Again, Robert Schefter, DUIresults.com. We look forward to doing more shows with this very important issue. And thank you again, Kathleen, for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.